You are our heroes in music, no question about it. Yeah, such a beautiful job. Jen, Rudy, John, Ron, Sophia, great. Thank you so much, so much. So, as we proceed in this celebration, we will do our treatment for freedom. Together aloud, I speak my word for myself, my center, and all its members and friends. I know love as the only reality. I am created out of love, and love is what I am. I know this love is absolute freedom in every area of my life, the life of my center, and all who call it home. I know our center's mortgages are paid in full, and I claim for all of us financial freedom with all debts paid and cleared. I release any sense of struggle or wrongdoing. I live in an abundant universe where there is more than enough for all. We experience freedom in every moment by always having more than enough money, vibrant health, and loving relationships. We see the world through the eyes of love. We are blessed, we are rich, and we are free. And so it is. I say it every morning with Kate and I, we do it just a little different, and I get strung up with doing it here. It's we're all love, and it is all one. And we do it through our points of power. I always pay attention. I always tell the truth and tell it quickly. I always ask for what I want when I want it. I always take total responsibility for my experience. I always keep my agreements. And so it is.
So this morning, if you haven't heard already, we have a special guest speaker with us this morning, Terry McBride. He is the author of The Hell I Can't, and he has done some amazing things. Let me just tell you a little bit about him. This is the story of a man taking responsibility for his life, his recovery, his journey back to perfect health, step by step, and how he did it. Quoting from his website, I did not make this up, "Every once in a while, someone comes along who is so inspiring that even the most discouraged pick themselves up and try again. Terry McBride is such a person. He has done amazing things with his life, and he will inspire you to move beyond your limits into the freedom you seek and deserve. Let's welcome Terry McBride."
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to a place that knows you as God. That's the opening line of the first song we sang. Welcome to a place that knows you as God. The title of my talk this morning is Wholeness is not something you can attain. It is something you accept. I want you to know how honored I am to be with you again. I've been speaking at Science of Mind and Unity Centers for almost 40 years. What Barbara and John Waterhouse have created here is really quite unique, even within this metaphysical movement. I have never been in a Unity or Science of Mind Church is not making anybody wrong, that started their service with, welcome to a place that knows you as God. How many of you have not heard me speak before? Raise your hand. Well, have fun. Growing up, I'd heard about the power of belief. You know, I was raised in the Disciples of Christ Church. It wasn't a real fundamentalist kind of thing. It was real positive. They talked about, you know, what Jesus said, as you believe, so shall it be done unto you. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believing you shall have it, you shall have it. All things are possible if only you believe. So I sort of danced around about that stuff, but quite frankly, I didn't know anybody who really owned that kind of thing. And then when I was in college, a small community college, I was taking Psych 101 or whatever that was that everybody has to take. And my psych professor, he wasn't, you know, I worked, finished, after I graduated high school, I went and dug ditches with my uncle for a couple of years in Idaho, worked construction. I thought that might motivate me to study a little harder in college than I had in high school. So when I started college, I was like, you know, 24, 25 kind of thing, and, or no, I was like 23, but anyway, my psych professor was like a year and a half older than I was. And so we got to be friends, and it turned out that he got his master's degree, he did his thesis for graduating in hypnosis. And this was, you know, back in the 1960s. And one of the things I remember when we were talking, he was telling me about the studies they had done with multiple personality disorders. And depending on when an individual had this personality, they had these diseases. They might have diabetes and need glasses. But then when they shifted over to this personality, they no longer had diabetes or needed glasses, but they might have high blood pressure or something else. And it just began to, you know, sort of tickle my consciousness about this idea that what's ever going on in our belief systems manifested itself in our body. But again, they were just sort of superficial discussions about this stuff. But then, as some of you know, in my early 20s, I had a spinal fusion during surgery. Spine got infected with E. coli bacteria. And so this E. coli bacteria spread up and down my spine, and after about 9 or 10 surgeries, spinal surgeries, where they'd go in and cut the infection out of my spine, the doctor started talking about it being not curable. The doctors started talking about me being left with significant permanent disability. By that time, the E. coli had eaten holes in the lower colon, so they pulled my bowels out and clipped them and sewed them to my abdomen like two pouty lips, and it's called a double barrel colostomy. And I went to the bathroom in a plastic bag, and they said, "You're going to have that for the rest of your life." So I started going a little further than just discussions with this psych professor about, you know, the power of belief, and I started to get involved in what we call today New Thought. And in my studies, I found that New Thought, John Waterhouse, 4 or 5 weeks ago, spoke at the International New Thought Alliance. And it's been around for a little over 100 years. It was started in 1915 with unity and divine science. But what interested me about this New Thought organization, and then when Ernest Holmes came along in the 1930s, then Science of Mind became part of that. But what interested me in that was that there are two basic principles that this New Thought is founded upon. And the first one is that you're a spiritual being. And then the second principle was that your consciousness created your reality. And in the old days, this New Thought was also called mind science, or it was called mind cure. So when I first started getting involved, I got involved in the mind cure part, reading various books and various authors, taking various classes. And at first I was really excited about the possibility of something I could do within me that would allow me to make a difference in my health. And so I was reading all of these various books, but since my focus was on how do I use these principles, I sort of moved away from the stories that people would say about, oh, I used to have this and then I got well. Oh, I used to have this and then I fixed it. Or this used to be my prosperity consciousness and I changed it. And so after a while, those quick fix stories about, oh, I did this and I got well, they didn't interest me anymore. What I started paying attention to were the tools that would allow somebody to create a new reality. Not just the theory that it can be done, it's not, but what did Emma Curtis Hopkins say about these tools? How did she use them? How did Charles Fillmore, and the unity principles, how did they use them? How did Ernest Holmes and his teachings that he called science of mind, how did they bring these principles into a focus so, if you will, I could do something with them? And I was gaining on my illness. After about 5 years, I did some work and I got the colostomy reversed. But I still had the infection and all kinds of physiological problems resulting from all of these major surgeries they were doing. And then I found science of mind. I was living in an apartment complex. I got to talking about this with one of the guys that was in that complex with me, and it turned out he was the president of the Seattle Church of Religious Science, and he invited me to church. But I want to tell you, they did not start the church service with, welcome to a place that knows you as God. It was alluded to, but it wasn't the forefront of the teachings. The teachings at that center were about the tools, how to use the tools, how to do this. And so I got involved in that, and I saw that the foundation for their prayer work, if you will, what we call treatment, were the first two steps. There's one divine presence in the universe, and that divine presence and you are one. But I sort of skipped over that. I didn't understand it. And so I was focused on the tools of choice. Focus. Do you know where you're going? Ernest Holmes says that science of mind is about moving to what you want. Science of mind is not about dealing with the things you don't want. So I was involved in focus. I was involved in taking responsibility for my actions, following through with appropriate stuff. What Ernest Holmes talks about, move your feet. I was involved in the choosing my mental environment with my affirmations or my affirmative, what science would call, what unity would call affirmative prayer, what science of mind calls our spiritual mind treatment. I was involved in using the tools to take charge of my consciousness. I was involved in the tools of using my imagination, visualization, guided daydreams. I had those tools and I was making progress. But the ultimate healing I was looking for eluded me. But as I began to get more involved in the actual teachings, as I started taking classes, as I started, believe it or not, volunteering at the church and showing up early and doing things to help the church work that way, that Sunday or on a Wednesday night service, that volunteering was almost as important as the classes I was doing. Because what it allowed me to do was to begin to associate with my sisters or brothers about how they used it in their life instead of just theory. And all of a sudden, a new reality began to sort of move up into my life. And that new reality centered around the idea that the real power that this movement brings to the human race starts with, we are spiritual beings. But it's not just the little phrase that's fairly common today out there in New Thought or even New Age, and that is that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. The way we teach it is much more. It's about moving inside and really beginning to experience yourself as this divine essence. And even though when I started, I knew that new thought, the cornerstones were you're a spiritual being, and that there is, a law of mind that responds to your thoughts. In other words, consciousness creates reality. So my focus was on the consciousness creates reality. But what happened is, as I studied, I got confused. Have you noticed the consciousness creates reality? There's thousands of books. And this book says, this is what you need to do to create consciousness. Oh, goody, so I had this list. And then all of a sudden the new book came out that was a bestseller, and it had this list. And then, I did this list. And then there was a new one about how to change consciousness. And after a while, the enthusiasm I had about this philosophy sort of got lost in all the things I was supposed to do. And how could I know which one of those lists I was supposed to follow? But when I got more involved in science of mind and began to understand that the cornerstone of this philosophy is not that there are tools that you can use to change your consciousness, which is true, we teach that. The cornerstone of this philosophy is that you're a God expressing uniquely as you. Because I grew up in a more fundamental church, when I first started, I read a lot of the Bible, the red letter edition. What did this great Jewish mystic 2,000 years ago mean when he said, as you believe, so shall it be done unto you? What did he mean when the faith of a mustard seed can move a mountain? And so as I began to explore within science of mind this truth they spoke to, what I began to understand was that if I was going to create the miracle I needed, I would have to hold myself differently. I couldn't just hold myself as a fairly intelligent young male who had these wonderful tools, focus, actions, thoughts, and all that stuff. If I was going to create the reality I wanted, I had to see myself differently. And at first, when I was studying in science of mind, it came up with the idea that I'm not my stuff. I'm not my history. I moved to, I'm not my prognosis. Since all the doctors were saying, here's the reality that you can expect, that's why the name of, when they said you cannot expect to come out of this hole, that's why the name of my book is The Hell I Can't. Because I couldn't title my book with the first comments I had when they said. So I moved to this idea that I'm not my stuff. I'm not my history. I'm not the labels that I have been given me. I'm not my, but still, I couldn't get around. And then I found a guy named Phineas Quimby. Now, Phineas Quimby was back in the early 1860s or something like that. He was, they say in New Thought, that he was the founder in the United States of our movement. I don't agree with everything Phineas says. He wrote a lot of negative stuff about doctors, and I happen to be working with a lot of doctors and didn't want to believe all that stuff. But he had one quote that I'll never forget, and he says, the human being is made up of truth and belief. And if a person is deceived into believing that they now have a disease or are likely to have a disease, then the belief is catching and the disease follows. Which is similar to as you believe, but when he said, people are made up of truth and belief, and if they are deceived into a belief that they now have a disease or are liable to have a disease, and the thing that intrigued me was the deceived. What that gave me as an individual was the right to say no to some of these cherished beliefs we have about humanity, like life is hard. You can't know the light of the day unless you've experienced the darkness of the night. If it's too easy, you won't enjoy it. It allowed me to begin to say no to all of those beliefs that I thought I had been deceived into believing. But still, there was a part of me that didn't own who I was. But as I began to stay involved, I began to read Living the Science of Mind, which is, I think, one of the finest books out there. On page 180, Ernest says this. Our union with the divine is not that we are one with God. Our union with the divine is not that we are one in God, for both of these imply separation. The truth is that you are of God. You are some part of God. Ernest goes on and he says, simply stated, you are the personification of that which is God expressing as woman. God expressing as man. And that, Ernest says, is the truth that Jesus was speaking about when he said, know the truth and it shall set you free. I could stand up here for 2 hours and talk to you about you're not your stuff, you're not your prognosis, you're not your sun sign, you're not your this, you're not your that. And some of you would be offended because, oh my gosh, yes I am. You know how sad you are, and I'm sad. Anyway, what this church offers you, what this centers offers you, is what until fairly recently you got shocked for saying. And that is, welcome to a place that knows your God. When you make that shift, and it's not something that you get overnight, because what Ernest talks about, this realization that you are divine, is not something that you can get to. You can't forgive enough, let go enough, be willing enough, and do something enough, and then you'll find out you're God. Because there's always something else you need to do enough again. You can't heal yourself enough into knowing you God. You can't fix yourself into knowing that you're God. You cannot take something that's broken and make it perfect. Even if you get some really big shot who can fix the crack so nobody sees it, it still was broken. The only way you can get to knowing the truth that sets you free is you've got to accept it. That's what Barbara was talking about last Christmas when one of her talks she was talking about. We need, the Christmas spirit isn't about just Jesus. It's about we as individuals need to accept that we are the Christ that we seek. That's the kind of stuff they talk about here. That's what John and Barbara have been about since the beginning of their ministry. And that is allowing their congregation, allowing the people that come with them to understand the foundation for who you are isn't just you're a spiritual being having a human experience. You're a unique expression of God Almighty. That's what this center is about. You want some homework? I remember when I began to look at that, and I went into the bathroom one day and I was looking in the mirror and I said, I am the Christ, and I could not hold my eyes. It's not a realization that we've been set up to own. But what this center offers us, what Ernest Holmes offers us, what New Thought offers us, is an opportunity to come together with our spiritual family and begin to look at truths that heretofore only a very select few have ever been able to look at. And what is that truth? Welcome to a place that knows you are God, that knows you as God. Yes, there are tools to use. I do workshops. I do things and help people heal physical challenges, mental challenges, all kinds of stuff. The tools of choice are about taking charge of your belief system. But the truth that will allow you to step up and produce results grander than you ever imagined is the truth that you are right now, God expressing uniquely as you. And this isn't new with us. Charles Fillmore in Unity, he says, he's talking about how do you step up? He says the way to do it is the way Jesus did it. He acknowledged himself to be the Son of God. The attainment of Christ consciousness calls for nothing less on our part than a definite recognition of ourselves as the sons and daughters of God, right here, right now, regardless of appearances to the contrary. What you have here in this center is an opportunity to begin to know the truth. Know it. A truth that will set you free. What does it set you free from? the lie of human limitations. I don't know what you're going through. My bet is there are some people in here who have challenges. Even after being in this years, I periodically have challenges. But what Science of Mind has given me is the truth that I'm not my stuff. And more than that, I am this unique incarnation of the divine that has the right and the authority to create reality. This is what Ernest says throughout his writings. He uses Jesus as the great example, not the great exception, the great example. And he tells each of us that what Jesus had was he had the ability to walk in human form as one having authority. That's what this center offers you. The truth that you are now the living Christ. And I encourage you to go stand in front of the mirror and say it. If you can't hold your eyesight, just keep at it. Pretty quick you'll be able to hold your eyesight. You might not be able to hold it for more than a few seconds before but you keep at it. And after a time there will come where you can stand there and look at yourself in all of your glory and say, I'm the living Christ. And own it. And when you know that, you will be free. See, that's what this center is about. It's about you achieving your dreams. Take a look at the stuff that's available for you. You know, in September, Barbara's going to have the basic ideas of Science of Mind. I know people, this used to be the foundations class kind of thing. I know people who've taken that 3 or 4 times, because every time they go through it, they learn something new. And you also have one of the finest teachers in the movement, Barbara Waterhouse. Because she knows how to grow corn with this stuff. This isn't just theory for her. She didn't just read books. She used it in her life. She tells us over and over again how she used it, the demonstrations she has. John, as this marvelous speaker, how he gets out and empowers the whole community, in the whole Science of Mind community about the power of it. But it starts, this wholeness, it starts with you knowing the truth that sets you free. Not because you have to do anything or have not done anything. You just have to know the truth that sets you free. I've been teaching and practicing this stuff for a long time. I ended up having 27 spinal operations over 11 years. I got letters from some of the finest doctors in the world saying what you have is not curable. You're going to have significant permanent disability. I'm 72. I don't have any physical problems. I have none of the residual effect. I have no limitations and no pain. Why? Because I own the truth that set me free, and then I want to use these tools to create the body that I wanted. And if I was to summarize all that I have learned in these, 40 years of studying and teaching, I would say I could summarize all of that in 3 concepts. I am whole. I am powerful. And I am free. I invite you to close your eyes. Open to the energy in this room right here, right now. Feel the intention of Barbara and John and their board of directors, the volunteers, the intention to assist you to know and accept yourself as divine. Feel that. And say to yourself silently, I am whole. Feel it. I am whole. Allow your neighbor, part of your family, to remind you you are whole, you are loved. Silently say to yourself, I am powerful. I am powerful. Here holy place, standing on holy ground. Say to yourself, I am free. Feel it. I am free. Open your eyes. Welcome to a place